Hello and welcome to my podcast on the apocalypse. My name is Steve. In my previous podcast, I introduced the book The Apocalypse Letter by Letter, a literary analysis of the book of Revelation by Stephen Paul. Continuing in chapter 10 of The Apocalypse and using Steve's unique literary skills, he unearthed more gems. In chapter 10, verse 3, the prophet wrote, "And he cried out in a loud voice, even as a lion roars. And at the time he cried out, the seven thunders uttered the sounds of themselves." Compare this to 1 Peter 5:8, which reads, "And your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, goes about seeking someone to devour." The word roar and the stem ori are examples of onomatopoeia, for both are pronounced alike in imitation of the sound, the tone that a creature such as the lion makes. Whether Peter picked an onomatopoeic verb for emphasis or whether he was thinking of tomatoes and peas at that particular moment of composition is a matter for speculation. The point here is that the verb orien was available and others besides, but John chose a verb aesthetically unostensive in a sentence conceptually insistent. Indeed, I cannot imagine how verse 3 in any language can be read with attention without some wincing of the wits. For John's matter of hinting here is about as subtle as pounding of a gong. Thrice in the first 7 words, and a fourth time more with the 7 thunders, the reader thinks loud sound so that the verse redounds as near as possible to a direct communication of the object hinted, i.e., the pun. The wordage induces the mind to the verge of discovery. If the reader is also a veteran juxtaposer, very high is the probability that he or she on the first pass will make that last leap of imagination and interrelate a specific term with the context and thus recognize the pun, in Greek, of course. John did not care a fig about the aesthetical imitation of the lion's roar. Rather, he chose to communicate what the angel cried out. As heretofore noted, the conjunctive osper, exactly as, indicates the substitutive sense. Hence, the pronunciation of the verb mikatai, that is, the stem, represents the meaning of what the angel cried out. Micah is similar to Michael, to wit, the angel cried out Michael, which is Hebrew and has the meaning who is like unto God. The technical term for this kind of pun is paronomasia, a slight name change. Context corroborates the pun, and plenty of context is provided here. The angel was described as all clothed in cloud, and his legs as pillars of fire, which alludes to the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night that guided and defended the people of God during their exodus from Egypt. And this suggests a title belonging to St. Michael, the archangel, defender of the church. The angel wore a rainbow upon his head, which symbolizes the promise of peace, and this suggests another title belonging to Michael, angel of peace. The Bible tells that there are many angels, but it gives the names of only 3, Raphael, Gabriel, and Michael. The first 2 do not fit that role, the very demeanor of the angel in chapter 10. Moreover, the noun, phone, in its primary sense means a sound, tone, properly the sound of the voice, mostly of men, like Latin vox, a battle cry. One recognizes or identifies a person principally by the sight or sound of the voice, and the loud sound of the angel correlates with the pronunciation of the stem and mikatal. Therefore, the great voice may be translated as loud battle cry. The sound Michael, the phrase great loud voice, alludes to Jesus Christ in chapter 1, verse 10, which reads, "I became in the Spirit on the Lord's day and heard behind me a loud voice as a trumpet." This in turn alludes to the voice of God as described in the Old Testament. These words and nothing more the Lord spoke with a loud voice to your entire assembly on the mountain, Horeb, from the midst of the fire and dense cloud, from Deuteronomy. John indicated in chapter 1, verse 10, as in many other passages, that Christ is not only human, Son of Man, but also divine, Son of God. Hence, in the Apocalypse, the phrase great loud voice signifies that the voice is of divine authority and that the speaker is either Christ or someone who speaks in his name. Almost always the case will be the latter. But in chapter 1, verse 10, John added os salpigos, as a trumpet to the phrase. In the Old Testament, divine judgments were announced with trumpet blasts. Note the little word os, which indicates the substitutive sense. Therefore, the mention of a great voice or a trumpet refers to a divine judgment. This means that Christ comes many times in judgment through secondary agents, and these are not to be confused with the second coming at the end of human history. As I pondered chapter 10, verse 3, I was puzzled at the relationship between the two verbs, krezein, to cry out, shout loudly, scream, shriek, and lalein, to talk, chat, prattle, chirp, birds, to speak, utter. The verb krezein indicates that the angel issued his battle cry with great vehemence, but the verb lalein does not convey that vehemence, despite the fact that the seven thunders uttered their sounds at the same time, ote. The angel cried out. The situation suggests there should be agreement in regard to the ardor for battle. Bear in mind that the seven thunders are members of the episcopate, the four living beings, as shown by chapter 4, verse 5, which reads, and from the throne are coming lightnings and sounds, phone, and thunders. And cross-reference with chapter 6, verse 1, which reads, and I heard one of the four living beings speaking as a sound phone of the thunder. So the verb elesion should not be translated as chatted, prattled, talked, but as uttered, making the second sentence in verse 3 read, and at the time he cried out, the seven thunders uttered the sounds of themselves. The sense here is not that the seven thunders added their battle cries to the angels, but that they spoke in their official capacity. They uttered decrees, exhortations, teachings, etc. This particular usage of the verb lalein is found, for example, in chapter 13, verse 5, which states, and there was given to it, the beast descending from the sea, a mouth uttering great things, and is found also in chapter 13, verse 15, where the image of the beast, like a judge, issues death sentences. And there was given to it the beast descending from the earth to give a spirit, an evil one naturally, to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might both speak and do, so that such as they, if they will not be worshiping the image of the beast, will be being condemned to death. Having taken these things into account, I was puzzled at the difference between the official utterances of the seven thunders and the vehement battle cry of the angel, because they were issued at the same time. The number 7 here does convey the idea of indefinite number, and that it represents many members of the episcopate gathered together, but as said earlier, it has not so much to do with the indefinite number as it does with the church's readiness to undertake and complete, by patient endurance, the seventh and final phase of the second major part of the Father's plan. This is indicated by the angel's oath, that the time will be no more, i.e., there will be no more delay. But in the days of the sound of the seventh angel, when he is about to trumpet, also will be fulfilled the mystery of the God, as he announced to his own servants, the prophets. The seven thunders symbolize the totality of sacred authority in the heaven or church. They are the voices of an ecumenical council in modern times since 1059 AD. This has meant the supreme pontiff and mainly the faithful members of the Sacred College of Cardinals. Most of the other members of the episcopate or four living beings, namely the bishops, will not be present at the council, but in their native countries. The difference between krezein and lalein suggests that the seven thunders will not physically participate in the cumulative conflict between the mystery of God and the mystery of lawlessness, the conflict that is imminent, as indicated by the angel setting his right foot upon the sea and his left foot upon the earth, then roaring forth his battle cry. Be it noted, however, that the angel did these things after he descended from heaven. As defender of the church, St. Michael would not leave the church at that time except for one reason. God's enemies are not inside the church, but outside. If there are no enemies inside the church, then either they were never inside in the first place, or if they were inside, then they have already been cast out. If they have already been cast out, then the seven thunders are the Pope and those cardinals faithful to him who cast Christ's enemies out of the church. The question then is whether the Apocalypse contains an account of that expulsion. The verb krazein appears in chapter 6, verse 10, chapter 7, verse 2, chapter 10, verse 3, chapter 12, verse 2, chapter 14, verse 15, chapter 18, verse 2, and chapter 19, verse 17. In every instance, it is somewhere accompanied by the phrase loud, great voice, except in 18:2, which has a mighty voice. Only the first two instances are not directly related to the second or third woe. Instead, chapter 6, verse 10 is related to the eventual dethronement of paganism throughout the Roman Empire, and chapter 7, verse 2 is related to the eventual judgment upon the empire for the Arian heresy. The last three instances relate to the seventh plague of the third woe, which is the very end of this present evil age. Both chapter 10, verse 3 and chapter 12, verse 2 have something in common. Both relate to that time immediately before the last 3.5 years of the second woe begin. That is the 42 months during which the nations will trample Jerusalem, and the beast from the sea in chapter 13 will wage war against the little lamb and his church. In chapter 12, verse 2, John wrote, "And while holding in womb also she is crying out, krazē, while having birth pangs and being put to the test, torture, to bear, bring forth. The woman clothed with the sun is a great sign. She is herself and portends or points to something else, namely the great day of Almighty God." In chapter 16, verse 14, it says, "But the proximal result of this great sign is that Saint Michael and his angels, angelic and human, cast out Satan and his angels, angelic and human, from heaven unto the earth." And in chapter 12, verse 12, a loud voice in heaven declares the time of this event. "Woe to the earth and to the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he has a short time." This implies that as Satan was cast out of the church, so he will be cast out of the world, the earth and sea. Therefore, the term "a short time" can refer only to one period, the last 3.5 years of the second woe. Hence, the vision of chapter 10 may be placed immediately after chapter 12, verse 9, because the war inside heaven is over, and so Michael has come down from it on the offensive against the earth and the sea. The woman clothed with the sun and the seven thunders are one and the same entity. Basically speaking, the woman is initially the entire sacred college, chapter 12, verse 1, but after the war in heaven, she is the faithful surviving members, except the Pope, of course. At the time the cardinals will be put to the test, it will be irrelevant whether they know that God has prepared their escape to safety, described in chapter 12, verse 6 and chapter 12, verse 14. For none will know beforehand who will escape and who will, quote, not love their life even unto death, chapter 12, verse 11. Having proved their quality or mettle, the cardinals will, with clear conscience and authority, exhort the bishops, priests, and laity to remain faithful, even while they themselves, for the sake of preserving the official authority of the church, flee to safety in the, quote, wilderness, unquote. This then explains why John, by the verbs krazein and lallein, indicated a difference between Michael and the seven thunders. To shed more light on chapters 10 and 12, I proffer some passages from the Old Testament. As you read them, remember the mighty angel who swore the oath in the name of the living one, as well as the woman who cries out in birth pangs. Learn then that I alone am God, and there is no God beside me. It is I who bring forth death and life, I who inflict wounds and heal them, and from my hand there is no rescue. To the heavens I raise my hand and swear, as surely as I live forever, I will sharpen my flashing sword, and my hand shall lay hold of my quiver, from Deuteronomy chapter 32. To whom can you like me as an equal, says the Holy One, from Isaiah. The Lord goes forth like a hero, like a warrior. He stirs up his ardor. He shouts out his battle cry. Against his enemies he shows his might. I have looked away and kept silence. I have said nothing, holding myself in. But now I cry out as a woman in labor. Isaiah. By myself I swear, uttering my last decree and my unalterable word. Isaiah. I am God, there is no other. I am God, there is none like me. Isaiah. To human reason, I cannot prove absolutely by the text of chapter 10 that the mighty angel is Michael. I did not say I cannot prove it to faith. God does not mislead. The angel is indeed Michael. He is that archangel who in ancient time opposed, like David against Goliath, the highest of the seraphim, Lucifer his name. And he is that archangel who yet once more, for the final time, will sound the battle cry, the King of kings and Lord of lords. Who is like unto God? His name is Michael. If, dear reader, you were given that name, remember what it means. I'll break off here, because that's a lot to digest. By now you can see that Stephen Paul was able to prove that the sequence of events is not the same as the sequence of chapters in the Apocalypse. Chapter 10 comes after chapter 12, chronologically speaking, because Satan is being cast out in chapter 12 and is already cast out in chapter 10, as evidenced by St. Michael the Archangel coming down to battle him on the earth and sea. There will be more about this in future podcasts. The book is found at apocalypseletterbyletter.com, and a discount code is provided at the top of the page. Till next time, may the Lord Jesus Christ bless you and keep you.